Hey guys, Carl Cooper here with OnTheBlack.com. Got a very special guest with me, Howard Megdal, who is running the Megdal for GM campaign to be the general manager of the New York Mets. How you doing, Howard?
I'm doing well. Mets are tied in the fifth, so I'm cautiously optimistic.
So why don't you just give the viewers, tell them a little bit about yourself and kind of why you're doing this campaign.
Sure. Well, I have covered the Mets and much of Major League Baseball as a writer for most of my adult life, but I have lived and loved the New York Mets since I was 6 years old. And ultimately, I came to a point where I realized that this team holds sway over my emotions and so many of our emotions 162 games a year, 3 hours at a time, not to mention the hours and hours we spend on websites talking about this, reading about it, thinking about it. And so at a certain point you say to yourself, well, can the Mets do better by us? And if they can I put myself in a position to make the Mets do better? And so I'm running for general manager in the hope that having fans behind me and having the basic ideas of logic, transparency, and passion as my three guiding points to take over the New York Mets, that can lead to a lot of success for me and for my wife, my daughter, and every Mets fan who has wished for more success than we've had.
Gotcha. And especially over the last 3 years here since 2006, we Mets fans have experienced a lot of pain, a lot of embarrassing moments on and off the field, by the way, for this team. And, I'm just interested to know, is there one particular incident that sort of was like the tipping point for you when you said, I've got to do this?
For me, it really was less a tipping point and more an aggregation of them. And I know we'll get into it a little bit later on, but the K-Rod incident is so telling to me because if one of the other major league teams had a closer do what K-Rod did, the response would have been about K-Rod. And instead the response was about, the New York Mets are this or the New York Mets are that. And it really isn't the New York Mets' fault that Francisco Rodriguez had an incident like he had. But the reason it reflects upon the team is because of the 100 other things that were in the control of the New York Mets. I'm just shaking my head as Shane Victorino comes into score. That as 100 other things that the Mets could have done to run themselves more effectively on and off the field, by not doing those, this turns into something that reflects on the New York Mets, and that's the frustrating part about it.
Yeah, I got you. So, looking ahead, the off season will be upon us before we know it. Not too long here, another month and a half or so. And thinking about who the Mets have under contract for next year and some of their needs this off season, as GM, what would be sort of your top priority? What would you look to do first in the off season?
It's hard. I don't mean to not answer that question fully, but to say what would I do first, to me, that's very much how Omar Minaya seems to approach it. He seems to approach it as, all right, we have a bullpen problem, we're going to solve the bullpen. And never mind that we're not going to get around to solving second base because we were too busy solving the bullpen. I mean, you look at the back end of the rotation last year, well, they never really got around to that, it seems like, because they were too busy inexplicably going after Benji Molina and then signing Jason Bay to an unfortunately long and expensive contract. So to answer your question, as far as first needs to be solved, you need to solve second base. It has been an absolute sewer of a position for the Mets since Jose Valentin got injured. That needs to be solved. I think you need to make sure your outfield is better set up. If you have the opportunity to bring in a Carl Crawford, I think you do it. I think obviously the downside is you need to find a contract to slot out, whether it's Beltran's 2011 deal or, in Dream of Dreams, you get Jason Bay's contract out of the way with his 3 years left. Other than that, obviously catcher is another position where I think Josh Tolle could do a good job for them next year every day, but perhaps you need to make sure you have an effective backup. If he can't do the job, Henry Blanco isn't really a reasonable alternative to start every day, and I think you need to have a catcher who is more able to do that. And look, I think you need to assemble a decent bullpen, the fact of the matter is the Mets haven't assembled a decent bullpen since 2006. I like the starters. I think you can bring in a fifth guy. I wouldn't look to any of the top of the rotation guys that are available via free agency because I think they're overrated. And that said, I feel pretty good about Ike Davis at first. Obviously, Reyes and Wright you're building around, and you go forward from there with Angel Pagan in either center or one of the corner outfield spots. But
Right.
yeah, there's a lot to do.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot to do with this team. Just going back to the K-Rod incident for a second there, and looking at the way the Mets handled it, suspending him for 2 games without pay, bringing him back now, and apparently he's going to be undergoing some anger management treatment or attending classes or whatever he's going to be doing. How do you feel the Mets handled this situation? And what do you think long-term about K-Rod being on this team?
In terms of the immediate response, to me, this was one of those problems where there really are no good alternatives. I think they obviously expressed their disappointment. I think it was very telling that Omar Minaya was said to be unavailable because he was attending baseball's quarterly meetings, which I think is silly for any number of reasons, not the least of which that I'm sure at this quarterly meeting that they had a telephone if you wanted to do a conference call, and that's something that the Mets have done many times. I mean, I was on the Omar conference call when Johan Santana was acquired. Apparently he was available to talk to them. So, I mean, it's kind of silly, and you kind of have a rudderless situation where the GM isn't speaking about it much, and the owner issues a two-sentence statement. Now, that said, I don't really know what being more out front would have accomplished, and I think it was fine. I think they probably had the most that they could do in conjunction with Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association, and so it's hard to knock them about it. Now, the question shifts to what do you do with K-Rod? I don't think you look to trade him for pennies on the dollar. I think that's silly. I've written recently that K-Rod has had a very good year, and I believe that. Rodriguez, as closer this year, ERA of about 2.28, I believe. He's blown a few saves, but just about every closer other than Mariano Rivera has. And he's someone who I think could do well by them in 2011. Now, it's unfortunate that they haven't signed to this $17.5 million 2012 option. If you could get something of value for Francisco Rodriguez and replace him, it's certainly something I wouldn't be opposed to. But I wouldn't look to get rid of him at all costs. And that speaks to sort of my approach generally, that there's this idea player X needs to be traded or player X needs to be acquired. And to me, it's never a binary question. It's, well, K-Rod, then who is it going to be and what are you getting in response? And everything needs to be evaluated that way, not as, well, should we get Benji Molina or not, and spending a month hoping to sign Benji Molina, not the least of which, if not Benji Molina, then who? The answer is practically anyone.
Right. And so the last question I have for you, and you can leave my viewers with this, is why should they vote for you for GM?
Well, I have a track record of success when it comes to discussing the New York Mets and evaluating their strengths and weaknesses. But even more so, I would guarantee you not that the Mets will win every year under my watch, but that the Mets will be put in the best possible position to win. That's number one. But number two, at no point will you have me as GM thinking short term, because the fact of the matter is, if all things were being equal, I'd be happy not to be GM. I'm writing about the Mets for a living. I'm very happy doing that. I'm not looking to spend my time at 11 p.m. in a Marriott having a discussion about doesn't matter to me that much, and then to my family and to my friends that much. And so if you put me in position to make the Mets the team that I believe we all know they are capable of being, I will make moves not just to help my short-term job security. I'm making moves so that 10 years from now, I'm sitting in the stands with my daughter, who will be 10 years old by then, that we can watch a long-term winning team. And I think that's what really matters to all of us.
Gotcha. Well, Howard, I want to thank you for taking the time to answer some questions tonight. For the viewers out there watching, please leave some comments under the video, and also I'll be running a poll on ontheblack.com this week that you can vote yes or no for Howard for GM for the New York Mets. Thanks, Howard, and I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the polls. If you go to megdalforgm.com, this week is actually Move On Monday, the equivalent of Super Tuesday, and so there are going to be actually 7 polls where I will be running for GM. So I would appreciate your support in any and all of them.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you.